Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's EAC webinar. This is Cassie Stumo. I am the marketing specialist at EAC. Today, we will be talking about how you can transform your after-sales service to increase profitability and drive growth. We will begin today's session with an introduction of EAC, and then Bill Schlund will be taking over. This session is being recorded. Unless there are any technical difficulties, then everyone will receive a replay after the webinar. Any questions in the queue will be answered after the presentation. I do see some familiar faces, but for those who don't know who we are, I'll start off with a quick introduction of EAC. Our mission statement is to transform the way businesses design, manufacture, connect to, and service their products. Our goal is to help companies bring their products to market with the right tools and resources to be successful. We do have a range of products and services that we sell, including CAD, PLM, and SLM software and desktop 3D printers. We implement the Internet of Things and augmented reality into business strategies, and we offer help with design and engineering projects. And we also offer various training courses and mentoring. Today, we are focusing on the service part of your business. So I will pass it on to Bill to discuss how you can create, manage, and deliver your after-sales service.
Thanks, Cassie. Hello, everybody. I am the aforementioned Bill Schlund. As Cassie mentioned, we transform the way that companies design, manufacture, connect to, and service. And today we're going to focus on the service portion of this. We're going to leverage a little bit of the design stuff to get us started. But the service lifecycle management applications that we have are very robust. They all talk to each other. They're all managed in Windchill. And it's really kind of broken down the whole process into three areas. We have the create portion, the manage portion, and then the delivery portion. So the process that I'm going to go through today is I'm going to leverage some existing things that have been checked into Windchill, and I'm going to use those to create a service bill of materials. We'll be able to take some of that information then and create 3D illustrations using Creo Illustrate. We'll also be able to take some of that information and bring that into Harbour Text. Harbour Text allows us to really put the text around maybe the illustrations or the movies or the graphics that we create. So we'll be able to do that. Once we have done that, we'll bring it back into Windchill, and we'll make use of the Service Information Manager. We'll create a book, and from the book, we'll say, let's create a PDF version of that. We'll send that into the Harbour Text publishing engine and create the PDF from that. Again, the deliverable is wide-ranging, right? We could send it to a 8.5 by 11 PDF. We could make movies. We could send it to a web page. We could format it for a cell phone or a tablet. But today we're going to use just PDFs and putting it on paper. So with that, I'm going to jump into working with the software itself. I have logged into Windchill. What I want to do is search for the component that we're going to use as our theme part. So I'll do a search. Here's our component. We can look at the information for that. We can see the little thumbnail. What we're going to be working with today is a crank assembly from an automobile. And we can go over and take a look at its structure. And one of the things that we'll do, as we can see it over here in the structure page, we can see that it's, the pistons, the crank, flywheel sorted components. I'm going to go and kind of expand this out a little bit more. And it's just so we can see all the other components that exist in this assembly. You can see them all here. Now, one of the things you'll notice at the top right here, it says design, right? So we're working really in the engineering bill of material at this point. This is what the engineers have put together. This is the order in which they put it together. Us as service people might want some of this, all of this. We might want to reorganize it. We might want to add components or pieces of our own to create our service bill of materials. So that's the capabilities that we're going to take advantage of here, I'm going to come in and say, let's open this in our service associative part structure browser. So what this does is it brings up a browser, and we'll kind of stretch this out to make it a little bit bigger for us so you can see this on the screen a little bit better. But on the left side here, we see that engineering bill of material. And what we want to do is on the right side, create a service bill of material. So I'm going to say, let's go in here and create a new downstream view. And it says, okay, what do you want to create? What kind of view? And we could say we want to make it either a manufacturing view, a service view. We'll keep it with service, and we'll say okay. So what this does is it brings us into the ability now to start creating our service BOM. One of the things you'll notice is on the left side again, we have all our design engineering information. You notice it says design after each one of these. And over here it says service. So we'll be creating our service BOM. Right now we just have a top level. And one of the things that we could actually take a look at is equivalency. And equivalency just basically says that this engineering BOM has a downstream equivalent, which is a service BOM. This service BOM has an upstream equivalent, which is an engineering BOM. So there's a one-to-one correspondence. We're going to be borrowing information from the mechanical engineering BOM and helping it to create and populate our service BOM. So the first thing I want to do is we can take a look at our kind of a visual representation of the engineering BOM. I'm going to grab a couple of the components that we want to use in our service BOM. So I'm going to grab like the flywheel and the crankshaft. I'm just going to right mouse button on those and say copy. And then I go over to the service side. I'm just going to say I want to paste those. You notice that they highlight there on the left side, and then it copies them over on the right side. And you'll notice that they'll disappear on the left side as I'm using components. In fact, if I look at the visualization over here of my service BOM as it starts to evolve, we're going to be able to see what I brought in. So another thing that I want to do is think about the structure. Now this was structured the way that the engineers wanted to do it. I want to kind of create my own structure. I'm going to kind of create, I've automatically brought in or kind of copied and pasted some of the components, but maybe to the structure I'm going to say that I want to insert a new part. Let's make sure we're picking this guy. So we're going to insert it kind of at the top level, so it'll be at the same level as everything else. We'll say it's a part. And we'll call it, we're going to organize the piston and the connecting rods together. So I'll just call it like piston and connecting rod. And this is going to be a service kit. So I'll say yes, and it will be serviceable. And I'll say yes, say finish. So that creates our service BOM here. Now that we have this, I'm going to take this and say, one of the things, if we go over and take a look at our, kind of open up maybe the pistons. When I select on one of them, it kind of grabs all of them, right? And what I want to do is be able to kind of break this down so that for our service kit, I really only want a single piston and a single connecting rod, and we'll use that as our service kit. So what I'm going to do is come over here and say, what allows us to do this, I guess I should say, is select occurrences. So what that means is allow me to pick things individually. So under our connecting rod here, I'm going to say, let's insert like we did before, but let's insert multiple items. And this is going to allow me to kind of structure it the way that I want. So I'm going to say, we're going to take the piston and connecting rod, and we're going to break them into 3 different groups. We could have maybe the the connecting rod kit. We could have a piston kit. And then finally, maybe we could have maybe like the ring set, right, for the rings on the piston. I'll just say, let's create that. So this creates a little structure here, and now I can start bringing in the components that I want to fill these in. So the first thing we're going to do is think about our connecting components. And I'm going to leverage some of the things here that we see. So here we see a connecting rod. I'm going to open that up, and we can see it's made up of a number of different components. And actually, for the connecting rod, I want to grab all of these. I want to use all of these. So I'm just going to grab here, just do a shift. So simple again, copy and paste. Say, let's copy these parts over into our connecting rod. And they automatically get added in. Now we can go over and say, let's start focusing on the piston itself. You notice that a big connecting rod gets brought in over here. I want to say, let's look at the piston, this guy. And again, the components of the piston, the thing that I might want to do is say, let's just grab some of these. So you notice I'm grabbing some of the retainers, some of the pins, kind of the basic components of the piston itself, but not the rings. And again, just real simple copy, pick on our piston kit, and paste those into the piston kit. And then finally, we can go over and grab the ring components. And again, there's 3 of those on the piston. So you notice that engineering-wise, they put everything under the piston, but here we're breaking it up into a series of kits. I'm just going to say, let's copy these and paste those here. Another thing that we can do, and you notice that, again, everything has been highlighting over here. Here are rings that we brought in, the piston, the crank, the flywheel, and the connecting rod. One of the things that I might want to do is create my own components, right, that we might have use for. So I'm just going to come over here. Again, say let's insert a new part. And this one we'll say is just maybe grease, right? And so now that's been added to our service bill of material. So now we've created a service BOM by restructuring the engineering BOM, copying components that we would need, and then kind of bringing in some of our own. What I'm going to do is kind of grab these components that I have here. Now that I have this, I'm just going to say, let's check those in, right? So now that I've checked that in, I'm really finished with creating my service bill of material. So I'm going to close out of this little editor here, and we'll go back again to the engineering BOM, the design BOM. But now we want to take a look at the service BOM that we just created. So I'm going to go over here under filters and say, let's include service information now. We didn't have it before, now we do. So if I come over here and say, let's look at our service BOM. We can see we have our connecting rod that we have here. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to start working with it to create some documentation and things of that nature. So now that I have this all set up, I've checked in my work. I'm just going to go over here and say, let's check in this. So I've created my service BOM. I've got things organized the way that I want. and we're going to be able to go in and work with this information in more of a downstream aspect right now. One of the things that we might want to do is, I'm just going to kind of expand this out. I'm going to take this and I'm going to say, let's generate a parts list. All right. So this is the information that I'm going to want to use in some documentation. So I'm picking out certain portions of my service BOM to create specific documentation for it. So I'm just going to say, let's generate a parts list from the things that I selected. And we can take a look at it right here. So we can take a look at the structure of our parts list. We can take a look at the visualization of it. And again, this is what we'd expect to see. Here's our connecting rod and our piston and our rings. And now that we have this, there's another way that we can, or another aspect of this that we can look at. Since we're going to be creating some documentation for this for our parts book, I can go under items here and we can see the different components and their item numbers. So it's numbering these 1, 2, 3, 4. But again, this is certainly things that we can change. I'm just going to use different numbers just for the sake of making things differently. But it's showing us the different components. We have a ring set, a piston, connecting rod set, quantities, all of that is already set up for us. So now that we have kind of created this representation, I'm going to say this is the way we want it. We're going to kind of save this as our default view of this kind of organized information. And we're just going to go in and check this in. So we're checking in our parts list. So the reason we do this is we create a service bill of material, we pull out the parts that we want, and then we create documentation based on those lists that we create. So let's go take a look. Well, let's take a look at our parts list here for a second. Let's grab this guy and call him up. All right. All right, so let's see what we're doing here. We're going to say, so we've created this listing here. We can see that we have our, I'm in the kind of the work group manager now. We can take a look at the different cabinets and things. Let's say, let's search for a parts list. Looks like our session has expired, so let me see what we can do with this. I'm going to minimize this just for a second. Let's do a search for this. Oh. We'll look for our parts list. All right, so here we come across and our parts list is, let's go edit this for a second. All right, so here we go. So going to the information here, we'll take a look at our parts list. We can look at the structure of our parts list. Again, this is going to show us what we saw before, the various components. If we look at the visualization, we can see that. One of the things we can do is take a look at related objects. So by me checking this in, what it's done is it's automatically published a PDF version of this and also a viewable version for Creo View, PVZ file. But what I want to do is start to create an illustration that I'm going to be able to use in my book. And this is not going to just keep these components in the default view or even in the shaded state that they're in. I want to kind of customize that. So I'm going to go over here and say, let's create a new document. And we'll just call this like, I don't know, piston and Conrad illustration. And the input source is going to be our parts list. And we're going to base that off of the viewable file, not the PDF, because we're going to create this off of our viewable file. And say, let's go and do that. So what this does is it automatically calls up Creo Illustrate. It takes that part list, brings it into Creo Illustrate, and Creo Illustrate is going to allow me to modify these components the way that I want. So here we're looking at our components in Creo Illustrate. So this is under the Create section that we saw a little bit earlier on. One of the things I'm going to do here is grab some of these components. We'll say, let's grab the piston and the rings, and let's kind of explode those up a little bit. Maybe create a explode line here. We certainly don't want to keep it shaded. Maybe in our PDF documentation, we might want to have a hidden line display of that. So we can see that here. Also remember, before when I was changing some of the item numbers, I changed those. I could say, let's show those to me now. And you notice here are those numbers that I've changed. So these are the item numbers of the components that we were creating, or selecting, I guess I should say. Now that we have this, just gonna go in here, and there's lots of different changes that we can do with components and things like that. So let's go under maybe properties. We could say we could change the size of the text. We could change whether it's in circles or triangles around it, or the colors or fonts or any of that type of stuff. So now I've created this, I'm going to think a little bit about where I want to use this particular documentation, this particular figure, if you will. So I'm just going to go over here and say, let's put this on a tablet, smartphone. Now let's put it on a piece of paper, maybe a landscape. Kind of zoom up on it and say, this is kind of what we want to see. If we go over to our little figures representation here is the 2D figure that I will be leveraging in our parts book as I go to create that. So now that I have the image looking the way that I want for our parts book, I just go over here into Windchill and say, let's automatically check that in. It says you have to check it out first because we did pull in that parts list, so we do that. And it checks in our Illustrate. So we'll minimize Illustrate. The next thing we can do is go and take a look at our representation that we have here. One of the things that we can see if we go under representations here, we'll give it a second. Upon checking that in, it's going to create a viewable image for us, a thumbnail, and also the 3D representation that we can use as well. And so our publisher is grabbing that, and we're kind of waiting for it. Go take a look. So we have it, you notice that it's been created here. We have all our representations down here. We should be able to have our publisher take a look at this guy. Well, it's a little slow today, but it's going and it's going to be creating our PDF and our other information for us as we go in to create this. So now that I have changed this, I created, as we saw before, going over here, I've created this representation, and you can see that we could open it up in Creo Illustrate if we want. We've got the other representations down here. At this point, I'm going to want to take this modified parts list and say, let's just check it in. So now that gets checked in. Let's see if our publisher is done yet. Nope, it's kind of slow today. But again, we'd have a PDF representation here, and that's really what we're going to go and place in our book. There we go. So here we can see the representation, and this is the PDF version. So I'm just going to open this up so we can take a look at it. Again, it calls it up in Creo View. It's created a PDF of that explode state of the piston that we saw. Now, one of the things it does, it not only takes our image that we created here, but it also formats it. So it's using something called a style sheet, but it organizes the image we created and then puts some text around it. So here it put in, kind of a title on the top, the name of the figure, and then down below, a nice item list of the components that are represented. So this is going to be one of the pages that we use in our book. And it should also create a 3D thumbnail, as we can see that there. So everything is working. Let's continue on with our approach. So we've checked this in. We've got some information automatically being published for us. And let's kind of call up our browser here. The next step we want to do is, now that we've got some of this created, is I want to start creating a book. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, let's browse. Now, the information we've been working with so far today has been the Synergy car. So I'm going to go over here and go under, so we have a variety of different folders, right, that we've been putting our information in. But here we're going to go under our publication structure. So this is a little bit different. This is where we go and create the manuals. In this case, you can see there's already a couple already created. We've got a service manual here. We've got a service parts catalog going. What we want to do is create our own parts book. So I just go over here and say, let's create something new here. And for this, we can just call this, I don't know, like our Synergy car parts book. And say, okay. So if we go and take a look at our car parts book that we're starting to work on right here, we can take a look at its structure, just like we looked at the structure of the bill of material earlier on. Here we're looking at the structure of the book. Right now, all we have is basically the title of the book. Over here are other information that exists, pre-existing information for different things that have been used for publishing other various books for this particular car. But what we're going to do is kind of make our book start to take form. The first thing I'm going to do is say, let's insert table of contents. So table of contents. And again, this is going to update as we add chapters and pages to the book. The table of contents obviously is going to update. We could say also, let's bring in an index for our book. And then let's kind of continue on here. Now, one of the things that I might want to do is start creating chapters for our book. So just as I did before, in this case, I'm going to say, let's insert multiple publications. I did this exact same thing before when I was breaking down the piston into rings and connecting rods and piston set. And in this particular case, I'm breaking it down into different chapters. So we might have a chapter on brakes, might have one on the transmission, might have another one on the engine. And again, I can enter them in one at a time here. I'm just kind of saving myself by entering several in at the same time. I can see that those have been added here. So now we just have really the chapter titles. We don't have any pages in the brakes or the transmission or the engine. So the first thing I want to do is maybe for the brakes, I want to go over here and kind of borrow some information that has been used in other manuals. And I'll say the anti-lock brakes, let's just take those and drag them, drop them into our brakes chapter. And now those have been added. For the transmission, I could go in and say, maybe let's grab gearbox, tail housing, kind of drag and drop that into our transmission. Those pages have been added to that portion. Now for our engine, that's going to be a little bit different because we created the connecting rod information for that. And so in that case, what we want to do is instead of dragging and dropping something that exists, we want to do something that's new. I'm going to say, let's insert existing. And for our existing, we're going to say an existing information element. And so I remember I called it, I think it's like piston and connecting rod or something like that. So I'll just say, let's do a search for that. And oh, I guess it would be a dynamic document that we created. I think my spelling is a little bit. And search on our parts list. There we go. So did a search for our parts list. Remember that was that list that we created our image from. Now we're going to say, okay, let's use that. So that automatically, that piston image that we saw, that PDF has automatically been added to our book at this point. We can rearrange the chapters. It's easily kind of a click and drag things. If we want to move, say, our table of contents up to the top, we want to reorganize, you just drag them around in the tree that we see here. Now, one of the things we might want to do, I'm just going to select on the top, kind of the top node of our book that we're putting together. I'm going to say, let's insert new, and we're going to say textual information. This is going to allow us to use another application for creating, in this case, maybe an introduction. So this will be a dynamic document. And this will be for Harbour Text. We'll just give it a name. We'll just, since it's the beginning of our book, we'll just call it our introduction. Say okay. So now we can take our introduction. It's basically just a placeholder at this point, right? We haven't really created any text or anything for that. So upon selecting this, what we can do is go over to our list over here. We can see it here represented. I'm going to say, let's open this guy when I select him in Harbour Text. So again, it was just kind of a placeholder. By opening it up in Harbour Text, I'm going to be able to put some text and images into our introduction. Again, Harbour Text is connected to Windchill, so it wants me to authenticate. And so now we can start on our introduction, what our introduction page looks like. And what it does is it brings up kind of a template that we can use. I'm looking at it here. This is where we enter in our text. You're looking at all these different, the title would go up here, an index would go down here. You might be saying to yourself, this doesn't really look like Word. Well, I can turn these things off, and then it does look like Word, but it's really handled a little bit different in Harbour Text. We enter in different information, different components of the page. It could be text, could be paragraphs, tables, images. And then as we saw before, a style sheet will take that and rearrange that into the format that we want. So it's kind of a two-step process. So the first thing I want to do with this guy, since I'm going to be creating something new, is I'll say, let's check this guy out. So I can make some changes to it. And I'm just going to go back here to our title. And instead of saying insert title here, I'll just call it introduction. And then we can enter in, here's where we can enter in text for the paragraph. And one of the things that I'm going to do is just kind of cut and paste some existing information that I have so I don't have to type it all in. But we'll just go over here and say, let's paste that. So now we've got a paragraph going. At the end of the paragraph, I'm just going to say I want to have a note. And what our note could say is, I don't know, for more information, visit, and where do we want it to visit? We'll give it a kind of a hyperlink in here. And we'll send it to EAC. Now, one of the things with this is we can take a look at it. When I create a hyperlink like this in text, it's kind of a question, well, where does this hyperlink go? I could just say pick here, right? The word here, you pick on that, it goes somewhere. But it's really going to eacpds.com. The hyperlink itself is external. It could go internal. It could go to another page in our book and bring us to that. But we're going to say it goes to an external website. I just typed in the website, and we can say we're good with that. So that gives us a hyperlink now that goes, leaves the page, goes onto the internet, and goes to the EAC website. Another thing that I might want to do is start to add some graphics to this. So over here, I just say, let's insert some graphics. I have some existing information out here. I could insert the PDF or the image that we created, that figure before, very easily. I'm going to say, let's do a search. And do a search for this. We have an image that it found. We'll insert that. Brings in the image. Again, it's at this point we can decide how we want to publish this. In our discussion for today, I'm creating a PDF file. We could send this to a web page. We could send it in a variety of different types of formats. One of the things that you can see here is that this is a dynamic image, right? So if this was going out to a web page, a person could just grab on the image, zoom in, zoom out. They could run an animation. It could have a series of different views or steps that they could click through just by going down here. In our case, we're kind of doing old school. We're just going to put it on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But now that we have our introduction page basically kind of set up the way that we want, all I have to do is just check it in. So So now that we're finished with our Harbour Text here, and again, upon checking this in, it's going to go and create our PDF, or however we want to have that delivered. Let's go over and take a look at our publication here. Looking at our structure page, I've created a number of things so far in creating this book, right? So I'm just going to say, let's take a look and grab all that information. So I'm just looking at the things that I have so far that I've been creating, and I want to check these all in. So now the book, all the chapters I've added, the different pages have all been checked in. Once they've been checked into Windchill, then we can move to our final stage. And that is to go over and take a look at, let's go over here to our representations. Again, remember, once it's checked in, let's take a look. One of the things we also, I guess, should want to do, we'll take our parts book here, is say, let's create a parts book. We'll give it a name, right? So we'll call it parts book PDF. And this is where we say submit it. So this is going to the publishing engine. And this will go out and create our parts book. In this case, publishing engine is going to create a PDF image for us, or PDF deliverable. And we'll be able to take a look at that. We'll go over our representations again. It's going out to the publisher here. It's going to take a couple of seconds here for it to bring up our publication that we created. One of the things I could do, I guess, while we're waiting for that, just kind of summarize what we've been doing today. So we went into Windchill, we pulled some information out into Creo Illustrate so we could create some technical illustrations. We also pulled information out so that we could create some pages with text and images as well. We created a book using the Service Information Manager, and then finally we took that book and we said, let's submit it and publish it out using the publishing engine that we see here. So give it some time. Here we go. Here's our published book. If we call this up to take a look at it, again, it calls it up in Creo View. Here's our car parts book. If we go to the next page, here's that introduction page. Now remember the style sheet. Remember when I created it, we had our text and we had our image of our car down below, but the style sheet said, no, let's move the car over to the sides to fill the page. And that's how we had it structured. If I come over here and I select on our hyperlink, this will go to the PTC website, eacpds.com, as you see. Great website, by the way. If we go to the next page, we can see here's our contents. So remember, as we filled in all this information, our table of contents filled itself in. And then finally, we'll go to, well, these are the pages that I copied and pasted in here, existing ones, but I'll go back to where the engine is. And is that transmission? Yep. I'll go a little bit farther. And then here's our connecting rod that we put in and the image that we created. So again, a real simple process. Everything is leveraged off of existing information, and we can create our own. We can restructure it the way that we want. And once we have that, we just publish it out. So very simple, straightforward process, using a lot of different applications. But again, they all talk to each other. It's all managed in Windchill so that we can be assured that if something does change, if some parts change, if we change this car to a convertible, we're going to see that update in all the different locations that it happens to be in any of our documentation. So with that, I'm going to turn this back to Cassie for some closing comments.
Okay, Bill, that was great. Thank you. I do not see any questions in the queue, so we will just end our session. So thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar on how you can transform your after-sales service to increase profitability and drive growth. We appreciate the time you took to be with us this morning. And like I said, as long as there are no technical difficulties, you'll be receiving a replay of the webinar shortly. So please reach out to Bill if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your day.